All right, welcome to the Young Turks. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur. We got a wild show for you guys today. A fifth accuser has come out against Roy Moore, and the Republicans have flipped on Roy Moore. Mitch McConnell saying that he will not be, that he believes the women who are accusing the Republican Senate candidate in Alabama. That's an amazing story. That's a little bit later in the program, and I'll tell you why. So here's what you're not going to get anywhere else. Why did the Republicans flip on Roy Moore? If it's because you think they all of a sudden grew morals, that's a good one. Okay, I'll tell you the mechanics behind why they are choosing to do that, and then Donald Trump, of course, cozies up to dictators across the world. Another interaction with Putin, and then Duterte. And that is unbelievable what he laughed along with. All right, so that's all a little bit later in the program, but let's get started right now. Okay. Dianne Feinstein is being challenged in her California Senate run. She's 84 years old. She's been in the Senate for 25 years. She's been in politics for nearly half a century. And she has not changed with the times at all. And she is, of course, among her issues, not nearly aggressive enough in challenging Donald Trump. Because part of the establishment thinking is, well, the most important thing in the world is to be civil. So let's be civil to one another. She had said a little while back that, hey, you know what? Maybe Donald Trump can learn and become a good president after all. Now, she didn't say that before he took office or right after he took office. She just said it just a little while ago. I mean, he has been an absolute train wreck, and nonetheless she thinks, well, do declare, maybe you can turn it around. I have a theory as to why she said that, but first, Jake Tapper is going to actually challenge her about that on State of the Union. Let's watch the beginning of that.
This week, Allison Hartson, who is a 37-year-old Bernie Sanders supporter, announced that she's going to enter the race. You're already facing a challenge from State Senate President Kevin DeLeon. Their argument is that you haven't held President Trump accountable and that you're part of the problem in Washington. How do you respond?
Well, I respond that there's a certain degree of unfairness in that.
Wow. Okay, so first of all, I love that already the progressive candidate is getting this establishment Democrat to perhaps try to answer some questions and hold her accountable. So complaining that your opponents are not being fair is not very helpful or productive. So why are they not being fair? So have you gone after Donald Trump? No. First of all, you have agreed with him a third of the time, which is actually among the higher totals among the Democrats in the Senate. So that's a pretty bad number. You agreed with some of his cabinet picks. You still think he could be a good president. That's unbelievable that she thinks he could be a good president. Okay, so what might be a reason that she's not challenging Trump? What would I do if I was in her situation? Well, I would say, well, I mean, we got to talk about this guy's corruption. He talked about how he was going to, go after the hedge funds and their tax loopholes. Well, we just had the tax cut plan, for example, and it turns out, no, Trump was lying. He's not going to go after the loophole that private equity and hedge fund guys use at all. Oh, right. One of those guys is Dianne Feinstein's husband, but many of them are Dianne Feinstein donors. So you don't talk about Donald Trump's corruption if you're worried that talking about his donors will lead to talking about your donors. That's what's going on here. So, but that's okay. Look, Tapper let her continue, and she's going to get to explain to you guys what the principal problem with Donald Trump is, because apparently progressives are being unfair. So she is going to stand up for herself and say, Trump is really bad. Why is he really bad? Let's find out.
What I said was in a Commonwealth speech, and parts of it were excised from the speech. But what I said, I hope in these months he can learn and end up being a good president. I don't think, and that was catastrophic for some people in my state. Everybody sees what the flaws in this president are. There's no question about it. And that's why this trip right now going on, I think, is worthy so much attention. Can he actually stay on script? I watched his remarks in Japan with respect to the military that were receiving him, and I thought he did a good job. He stayed on script.
The biggest problem Donald Trump has is that he doesn't stay on script. That's his biggest problem. That's unbelievable. I could list you dozens of problems that Donald Trump has. I mean, the absolute destruction of the Environmental Protection Agency, the destruction of the Department of Education, and then taking that money and giving it to extra spending in defense contractors. To be fair, her husband got a huge defense contract after Dianne Feinstein voted for the Iraq War. There's a reason why Dianne Feinstein doesn't want to bring up things that are problems for Donald Trump. How about the tax cuts? My God, 80% of the tax cuts that Trump proposed is going to go to the top 1%. Oh right, that's where Dianne Feinstein is, in the top 1%. That's where almost all of her donors are, in the top 1%. Do you know that Dianne Feinstein voted for the Bush tax cuts? There's some chance she'll vote for the Trump tax cuts. I'm not kidding. The only reason she wouldn't do it is because you were putting pressure on her, and we're putting pressure on her. But when there was no pressure, and the internet had not grown to the size that it is now, and she could just go on TV and pretend to be progressive, she voted for the Bush tax cuts for millionaires and billionaires. And guess what? Her own family got a giant tax cut. So given her own choices, we know which direction she'd go. That's why Allison Hartson and the Just Democrats putting a spotlight on Dianne Feinstein is so important. If you let her be, she'll vote for more war, as she has definitively done. It is not a question. She'll vote for more warrantless wiretapping. Why is she not upset about the drone strikes where Trump is now killing 4 times as many civilians as the Obama administration did? Because she generally likes drone strikes. Why is she not complaining about the $70 billion they added in wasteful spending to the Defense Department? Because she agrees with extra spending for the Defense Department, part of which goes to her family, and it goes on and on. So, look, if you want an actual, isn't it insane that we have one of the most conservative Democrats in the country representing California, one of the most liberal states? If you want an actual progressive who's gonna run against her, go to justdemocrats.com/Allison. Allison Hartson's running, and find out more about her, do whatever you gotta do, volunteer, and contribute in any way you can, in my opinion, because I don't know why California is one of the most conservative Democratic senators in the whole country, one of the most conservative Democratic politicians in the whole country. It's not an exaggeration. Bush tax cuts, Bush's Iraq war. She doesn't believe in getting money out of politics. She has never fought for it, never. Why? Because she's bathed in money. She brags about how all the money that she has and why progressives will never win against her, against Medicare for all, against college for all. She's for the death penalty. There's a chance that she might be the most single conservative senator in all the Senate. Joe Manchin's really conservative. He didn't vote for the Bush tax cuts or the Iraq war. I mean, he wasn't in the Senate, I know that. I guess he would have voted for, but I'm not positive he would have voted for the tax cuts. We don't even know if Dianne Feinstein is gonna vote against Trump's monstrous tax cuts. Every time there was tax cuts for her class, the elite, the top 1%, she has voted yes. She's gotta go. She's gotta go. California, you must have a progressive senator. Look into Allison Hartson. If you support her, great. If you don't, find another candidate. It can't be Dianne Feinstein. It is way, way past time for change. JustDemocrats.com/Allison, because that's exactly what the Just Democrats stand for. Strong progressives who are gonna bring you real change. Okay, now, let me go to the heart of the problem here in America with the Democratic Party, okay? Now, we know what's wrong with the Republican Party. They take donor money and they give them tax cuts. That's the whole point of the Republican Party. But luckily, recently, they have made it incredibly obvious. Gary Cohn, the top economic advisor for Donald Trump, said in regards to the tax cuts, the most excited group out there are big CEOs about our tax plan. Yeah, of course, that's because that's who you serve. They're going to get giant, enormous tax cuts for their companies, which then they're going to use to buy back stocks and to increase the bonuses that they get through their own stock options. Okay, but thank you for admitting it, we appreciate it. Representative Chris Collins, Republican of New York, has said, my donors are basically saying, get it done or don't ever call me again. Again, thank you very much for clearly outlining the legalized bribery and out of control corruption that we have here in America, and certainly within the Republican Party. Senator Lindsey Graham from South Carolina has said the financial contributions will stop if we don't get the tax cuts. In other words, we were always lying when we said we care about the deficit. This is gonna add $1.5 trillion to the debt. We were lying, we don't care about the debt. Oh, the middle class, no, we're gonna raise taxes on at least a third of the middle class. Not only has independent groups said that, the Republicans have acknowledged it. So no, we're increasing taxes on the rest of you to get our donors tax cuts. Unreal, right? And then finally, Stephen Law, who is working for the donors themselves, says donors would be mortified if we didn't live up to what we've committed to on tax reform. He's actually the head of the Senate Leadership Fund, which helps Mitch McConnell. But I say he works for the donors because he funnels the donor money to the Republican senators. So he is admitting they will be mortified if they don't get their tax cuts, which is why they bribe the senators and the politicians in the first place. Now, in America, we have an insane system where bribery is legal. You call it campaign contributions and independent expenditures. Now, don't worry, guys. The Democrats, of course, are the opposing party, and they are going to stand up to them. So here's Senator Chuck Schumer, the leader of the Democrats in the Senate, saying they're paymasters, if you will, the hard right, the Koch brothers. All they want to do is cut taxes. They don't care about the deficit. They don't care about the country. They don't care about the middle class. They just want their taxes reduced, and they run the Republican Party. Now, that is exactly right. I'm super glad he said that. So now we're going to go to a Democratic donor. Interesting. Stephen Klubeck. He is a CEO, and he is in that millionaire, billionaire class. But don't say that, because that'll make him very upset. Now, we know what the Republican Party is about, but let's find out what the Democratic Party is about. So here's one of their top donors explaining.
Is it the right message that the Democrats are going with?
It's so effing wrong.
Whoa.
I've talked to Schumer. I've talked to Wyden. I've talked to Pelosi.
And said what?
And I said, if you use the term billion again, I'm done.
Why?
Because it's aspirational. I didn't start with anything. Just penalize everyone that's done well. We all want to do well. And we should be the party of doing well. We should be a party of business and leadership. And it is very, very disturbing when I hear the millionaire or billionaire word. And I've told them to stop it, knock it off.
Well, now we see where the donor class stands in the Democratic Party. Don't you even say the words millionaire or billionaire. Do you understand your marching orders, Chuck Schumer, that gave that fiery quote? No, don't do that. Nancy Pelosi and the others, know your role, shut your mouth. Because the millionaire and billionaire class now are so arrogant that they'll go on TV and go, what did I buy these guys for? I bought them so they shut their mouth when we talk about tax cuts. You can fight on other issues. Go ahead and distract people with other social issues, cultural issues. But when it comes to tax cuts, we will have our cuts. He says, don't penalize us. Who the hell's talking about penalizing you? We're talking about whether you should get another round of trillions of dollars in tax cuts and make the middle class pay for it. So if you thought it was just the Republican Party, you got another thought coming to you. If you set up a system where they are allowed to take unlimited money from rich people and from corporations, both sides will take unlimited money from rich people and corporations. Now, luckily not the whole Democratic Party is like that. I would say 99.9% of the Republican Party is at the national level is completely corrupt. They will do whatever their donors tell them, and right now they're bragging about it. The Democrats are closer to 80%. It's a rough estimation. If you want to say it's a little higher, I'm not going to argue with you. The problem is the system. You cannot allow for money in politics. If you allow private financing, they will serve people like Stephen Klubeck, who privately finance their elections. You have to have public financing so they serve the public interest. This is so obvious, but the reason the Democrats don't fight on it is because they have the same donors. So let's find out a little bit about Klubeck. He gave well over $2 million to the Democratic Party last year alone, including a $1 million donation to Hillary Clinton's super PAC Priorities USA. Here's a little screen grab of the $1 million that he gave to Priorities USA Action. That was their super PAC that, among other things, attacked Bernie Sanders for daring to talk about the millionaire and billionaire class. The Klubecks of the world came along and said, oh, no. I'm going to give you $1 million so you penalize him. Make him stop talking about the corruption, okay? We're in charge here. He goes on TV, and by the way, Stephanie Ruhle has done a great job on other issues. This was not among them. Ooh, oh please, this whole, the F-bomb, and he's gonna curse again, as if he's like a regular Joe. I'm just a regular Joe, gives millions of dollars in legalized bribes to Democrats, and then tell them to do whatever I tell them to do, otherwise I'll stop giving them the bribes. Spare me the goddamn act, okay? So here's more from Klubeck.
Then are you worried that the Democratic Party is going too far to the left?
So much so, it drives me nuts. So much so, it would make me quit the party. And I've made it very clear, I'll cut your money off. And others will do the same. We've had enough.
Okay,
we need a new brand. I can tell you that if we go far left, I'm out. I'm out. We need middle ground.
So when you tell the Democratic leadership this, when you meet with Wyden and Pelosi and Schumer, what do they say to you?
Well, so far they've given me great signals that they're willing to participate and get there. We shall see. We shall see.
Okay, first of all, 2 words, good riddance. So the Democrats and their leadership and the Democratic establishment and elites, they had to kiss this guy's ass. So when he says, I'm out, you better do as you're told, they go, okay, no, we're not left, we're not progressives. We promise we'll do whatever you want, Mr. Billionaire. Now, Justice Democrats say, good effing riddance. Get the fuck out. You don't want to be part of the party because you want to take all the money from the middle class, put it in your pocket? Get the fuck out. I don't care about your money. Justice Democrats don't take corporate money and they don't take big donor money. So we don't care. He's used to making all of them heel. He goes on national television and says, we'll cut your money off. And the other donors agree with me. And the pathetic Democratic establishment heals. God damn it, isn't it about time you get real progressives, the uncorrupted? You don't take big donor money so you could tell guys like this to fuck off. You're supposed to represent your voters, not your donors. One more from this prick.
I'm just as caustic and arrogant and aggressive on the Democratic side. So, Trump-esque, Trump-light. But I'm willing to fight for democratic principles. And I'm not going to give up. And hopefully we'll get our shit together.
Oh yeah, I'm an aggressive, tough guy. I do lots of bribing. Okay, yeah, all right, and guess who else fights? We fight, okay? And we don't think the democratic principles you're talking about is more money for millionaires and billionaires. We don't agree. We don't agree. We don't think that the Trump tax plan where you raise taxes on the middle class and give it to the rich is a good idea. We think it's a miserable idea. We believe that a financial transaction tax is both smart in regulating Wall Street and regulating the risk taking, and also provides excellent funding for education and the American dream for the next generation. There are many things we don't agree on. We think that everyone in the country should have Medicare. Look, you want to have your lavish extra health care? Have at it, man. That is part of capitalism. I understand that. Go nuts. Have your private jets. Have your 17 doctors. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. We're talking about bare minimum basic coverage. Yes, everyone should have that so they don't die in the street. If you don't agree with that, get the hell out of the party. You're used to being the boss. You're used to being in charge because, as you said, the Democratic leadership is giving you great signals. Well, Stephen, we're going to defeat that leadership. We're going to bring in Justice Democrats, and then nobody's going to give a shit what you think. And then you can get all aggressive all you want in your goddamn corner, and you can go vote for Republicans like Trump all you want. You want to fight, let's fight. But no way do I agree to this guy giving orders to progressives on how they should help Republicans with tax cuts. Our answer is fuck no. Did you understand that, Stephen? Okay, I think that was clear enough. Let's move on. I'm on the warpath today. All right. So Donald Trump's Health and Human Services Secretary stepped down, Tom Price, for corruption. He kept using private jets on your dime. This is something that Tom Price had complained about before he had an opportunity to do it, and he did it all day, all night. That's why he just stepped down. Hypocrisy and corruption through the roof, so that's okay. Trump's gonna announce a new HHS secretary. Let's find out who it is. He says, happy to announce I am nominating Alex Azar to be the next HHS secretary. He will be a star for better health care and lower drug prices. Really? Well, that sounds positive, right? I mean, Trump promised lower drug prices on the campaign trail. He said he would fight the drug makers and make sure that the government could negotiate with them. It hasn't happened yet. Maybe Azar is activist. Maybe he has held the drug companies accountable before, and that's why he's a good pick. It could be. I mean, remember, as HuffPost points out, in promising to combat high drug prices, Trump has been critical of drug companies, saying that they are, quote, getting away with murder, and threatening, quote, some very major lawsuits against people and against companies that are hurting our people. So Trump is ready to go after those drug companies that are hurting our people, okay? They're getting away with murder. So Azar has obviously held those guys accountable. Let's find out what Azar did for a living. Azar, until January, was an executive at drug maker Eli Lilly. What? Wait, I thought he was gonna hold them accountable. He worked as a president at Eli Lilly. That doesn't sound like he's holding them accountable. Okay, well, let's find out specifically what he did, because maybe he was the internal cop. You said, okay, lower the drug prices. No, it turns out he led Lilly public affairs and lobbying efforts. Oh, great, he was a lobbyist for the drug makers. What was that about the swamp? You're a Trump supporter and you thought he was gonna drain the swamp? He's laughing at you. Lower the drug prices. I'm gonna put in the guy who lobbied to make them higher, you idiots. Trump is as corrupt as it gets, and he puts guys like Azar in for that, not despite the fact that they work for drug makers and lobbied for them, but because of that. So in 2009, under Azar, the company paid $1.415 billion to settle criminal charges regarding his promotion of Zyprexa for off-label uses. Oh, good, and borderline criminal activity. Nobody ever goes to jail if they're rich anymore. You go to jail if you stole $10 from somebody, but they steal $1.4 billion. They just pay a fine. They just pay a fine. Effective January 1st, 2012, Azar became president of Lilly USA LLC, the largest division of Eli Lilly and Company, and was responsible for the company's entire operations in the United States. Prices for drugs rose substantially when Azar led the business. The joke is on you. Trump is not going to put people that are going to lower drug prices. He has done absolutely nothing about it. Hey, they just did a whole healthcare proposal. In the proposal could have been a provision that said the United States government can now negotiate drug prices with the drug companies for Medicare. Was that in the proposal? Nope, not in the proposal. Now all of a sudden the guy who's going to lead HHS is a guy who's a lobbyist and president for the guys who increase drug prices. So what has Azar said? Well, Azar said in the past that insurers and pharmaceutical companies should work together to reduce drug prices without government intervention. So while he's president, the drug prices skyrocket at his drug company. Then as a joke, he turns around and goes, well, if the government doesn't interfere, maybe we'll voluntarily lower them. Well, you had all the opportunity in the world to voluntarily lower them when you were the president of the company, and you didn't lower them, you increased them. So you know what that makes you? A liar. And the idea that the companies, out of the goodness of their heart, will ignore the law about maximizing profit, when will instead, just because they're such good people, lower drug prices. If you believe that, no wonder you voted for Trump, because you are a blithering idiot. Okay, if he becomes HHS Secretary, Azar will take over the administration of the Affordable Care Act, which he has criticized as fundamentally broken, and like most Republicans, wants to repeal. Great. As the Health and Human Services Secretary, he will get to destroy health and human services in America. This is a familiar pattern for Trump's appointments. Now, unfortunately, the law gives the HHS Secretary enormous discretion over how to administer the program. This includes, for example, rewriting the rules over exactly what qualifies as essential benefits that all insurers must cover. and approving a request by states to waive some of the law's regulations on how Medicaid works. In other words, deregulate the industry. Let's make more money. And the thing about having to cover pre-existing conditions, it's a good thing I've got a lot of latitude here. I'm not sure you have to follow that anymore. And this is how we destroy the chances of people getting covered. Universal coverage, not even remotely possible. They're going to shred whatever is left of the Affordable Care Act. Azar worked for the George W. Bush administration, went and made bank at Eli Lilly, made a ton of money lobbying for them and then running a huge portion of their business. Then he goes back into government and he will not lower drug prices. I absolutely, positively guarantee it. He will increase drug prices. He will help his former employees who gave him millions of dollars to increase drug prices more. And here's another guarantee. Once he leaves the Trump administration, guess where Azar is gonna go back to? To another drug maker and make millions of dollars more and laugh all the way to the bank, thinking, idiot Trump voters, you let us rob you blind. Just like Trump University, just like everything Trump has ever run. They warned you and you didn't listen. Thank you very much for letting us rob you. That's the plan, and that's what they're doing right now, right in front of your eyes. Okay, last story for you guys in this segment. Okay. Roy Moore is running for Senate in Alabama. He's been accused now from 5 different women of, way beyond sexual harassment, sexual assault in some of the cases. And 2 of the women were teenagers, 16 and 18. He says, yes, he did know them. He did date them when he was in his mid-30s. And he did kiss them and make out with them when one of them was 16 and he was 32. He says, yes, well, he just likes beautiful young girls. The new person who came out today said he started grabbing at her when she was 15 years old as a waitress and sexually assaulted her in his car when she was 16 and he was in his 30s. So Sean Hannity, of course, has been vigorously defending this alleged child molester. Remember, the one thing Moore denies is the 14-year-old that says that I groped her and I stripped her down to her underwear and I took off all my clothes and tried to get her to touch my crotch. No, that's the one. I mean, I love beautiful little young girls, but that's the one young girl I don't remember. Okay, but Hannity believes him. Even the Republican leadership now says they believe the women. Okay, but Hannity sticking by his man. Here, watch.
And this goes back to what you said. Do people do it for money? Do they do it for political reasons? Is that more common than people would think?
Oh, definitely. I mean, they'll do this for
they will lie to make money.
And
this is where you thread the needle, because there are women that are victims of predators.
Yes, there are. There are.
So hard.
But very few, far between.
How do you know if it's true? How do we, what's true? What's not true? How do you ascertain the truth? What happens when it's 38 years later? And it's a serious topic. Do people lie? Now, we do have 10 commandments. One of the commandments is thou shalt not bear false witness. We know human beings break with regularity the other 9 commandments. Did they break this one?
Women have never been so disappointing. Like, the idea to me that someone comes out, 38 years later, allegedly, and is suddenly remembering how terribly traumatized she was. If she was stood right next to me now, I would be saying to her, that's not good enough. You've taken this many years to remember how upset you used to be. That is not good enough. You are disappointing as a woman.
I'm going to tell you what people are going to say to you, feminists in particular. Are you blaming the victim? Are you doubting the victim? That's what people are going to say.
You know what? Yeah. And immediately when people say, oh my God, you're victim blaming, immediately you're supposed to lie down, quake in your boots, like when people throw the term racist about, at me for no reason. You're supposed to lie down and go, no, of course I'm not victim blaming. Well, guess what? Actually, yes, I am at this point.
Well, good to know. These are the people that Hannity had on again and again, blaming the woman who at the time that she was sexually assaulted was 14 years old. Real class acts. So a number of advertisers are understandably aggrieved that the show they're advertising on is pro-child molesters, seemingly. To be fair to Sean Hannity, he says he doesn't believe that particular charge. He believes that Roy Moore dated 16-year-olds when he was 32 and that's awesome. but not the 14-year-old. He doesn't believe that one, okay? So Realtor.com and Eloquy have dropped out, and so has Keurig, the coffee machine. So then his supporters started going nuts. So there they are. Those are the people who cut advertising from Hannity's TV and radio program. So people started smashing the Keurig machines, and Hannity encouraged it. He says, so funny in regards to a video that was sent. Another one, he says, love it. Okay, so what does he love? Let's have a bit of fun and show you, I'll leave it at conservatives destroying coffee machines.
Wait. Oh boy. Oh.
Hope you're happy, Keurig.
Look what I found. Piece of shit.
Okay. Look, people destroying things is always fun. I get the appeal of it. I liked it in Office Space. Although when you get a guy with like, look at what I found, coming around with a bat, I don't know that I love that one. Okay, Hannity says, deplorable friends, I am buying 500 coffee makers tomorrow to give away. Details on radio and TV, hint, best videos. Look, my guess is attacking former advertisers is probably not going to lead to a lot of future advertisers. But that's Sean's call, and and I got mixed feelings about going after folks, advertisers, because I want to give them as much leeway as possible to say terrible things so we know what they're about, okay? And those folks, apparently, his viewers think that maybe Moore didn't do it, or maybe as some Alabama Republicans have said, state senators and representatives and other officials in Alabama, they said, oh, what's the big deal? Marion Joseph did it. I mean, it's okay to, and literally about the 14-year-old. Ziegler, one of the guys that we quoted on Friday's show, was like, even if he did it, I don't see the problem. Okay, I thought you guys were family values. If that's your family values, I get it. But at least now we know. So now, let me give you a couple more tweets here. So some people are going to hashtag boycott Keurig. Aren't these the same people that boycotted Starbucks and Netflix? We all know how well that worked out, Sebastian writes. And I'm pretty sure Netflix is still in business, right? Is Netflix still doing well? They're doing okay? Yeah, has anybody seen a Starbucks around the corner at all? Oh, right, around every corner, right, okay. So I love right-wing boycotts. My favorite was they boycotted Disney. You probably didn't notice because no one did. Because they said, oh, Disney treats its gay employees the same way that it treats straight employees. Wow, I hate that. You should treat them worse. They're not the same as us because we're really good. We're superior. And absolutely no one participated in that boycott. Disney stock continued to soar. Their theme parks were not remotely affected. And they went on to take out even more ads in LGBT publications. So the right-wing boycotts never, ever work. And now cutting off your coffee maker to spite your face, my guess is not going to work for Sean Hannity. So smash all the coffee you want, and I guess this is like the right-wing reaction to anything. Me no like, me smash. Let's see how well that goes for Sean Hannity. Tick, 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 until he's out of money. Okay, but at least we know what they mean by family values. We'll be right back.
Welcome to the Control Room, exclusive members coverage of 2IT postgame live from Rebel headquarters in sunny Los Angeles. So Jason, the air is electric after yesterday's postgame.
He's talking about Miami. You know, the only thing about this, Jason, is we've heard the Miami stories. I'm looking at Kasperian's interest here. She's giving him the cordial glance to the side, but I just don't know if it's really there.
Oh, that's
That's where the vagina is.
Okay, that joke landed like Apollo 13 there. And Kasparian gives him the courtesy laugh, gives him the Edwin wave.
Had you had sex at that point when you took that class?
Anyways, so...
Hold on a minute. He's found an opening. Is he finding his way to come back, Jason? Unbelievable! Jake Kruger coming back with a comment. No one would have seen this coming.
And he's in the mood, and there's some music in the background. He's got the sideburns. He's got the long hair in her 30s.
He won't fan himself. There's no way he's ready to... I mean, I've expected...
She's like, well, that was something.
He's got it.
Okay.
It's unbelievable.
Every dog has its day, and this dog is having the best day of his damn life.
That was an outstanding postgame. If tonight's postgame is anything like last night's, we were in for another.
Exactly right, Francis. And don't forget to check out the TYT postgame after the Young Turks every weekday on TYTnetwork.com/memberslive.
Complex subject. Nobody knew that healthcare could be so complicated.
He said I had small hands. They're not smaller. I never heard that one before.
Robbie Canal, he calls his work urban beautification.
I didn't go out to be a street artist or to make posters. I was just compelled to do it. I was mad enough it didn't matter. It was like a form of minor civil disobedience even, you know, like, fuck you. How about your higher crime? Power operates to self-replicate itself, to maintain the status quo so it stays in power. When you go to do something like this to express yourself in public about an issue you care about, make sure you pick a bigger weapon, and the weapon is knowledge. The one thing about street art, it's not like I put up my posters to change anybody's mind about anything. The difference between propaganda and the kind of art I do is propaganda is telling people what to think. The way the art works, where the art works, is between the time you see it and the time you figure it out for yourself. I'm an optimist. I might have made a lot of ugly paintings about a lot of ugly people, but it's out of love, not for them.
All right, back on the Young Turks, Cenk and Anna with you guys. Stephen Garcia wrote in, Cenk, you were so right about getting Allison in the race because California matters. Barely a few days and mainstream media is covering her. Tick-tock, tick-tock. That's right, justdemocrats.com/Allison. Let's show them what we got. Your mama writes in, TYT needs to interview Kevin DeLeon since they already interviewed Allison Hartson. It would be inappropriate not to do so. Hell, invite Feinstein too. Yes, Dianne Feinstein is very welcome to come on the show. Come on, we got a wedding for you, come on. So, look, I would give a fair interview. I gave a fair interview to Joe Manchin. Yeah. Some people complain that my interview with Joe Manchin was too fair. Okay.
Is he the guy who kept calling you Jenks?
Yes.
Oh, it was such a good interview for that reason alone.
Check that out if you remember. TYTnetwork.com/join. Kevin DeLeon is a guy pretending to be progressive in California. There was a reason we didn't back him because he's not a progressive. That's a long story. Okay, here on Uranus says, Cenk is all dapper today. Thank you. Thank you for noticing. Okay. Shaun of the Dead, that's all he said. Shaun of the Dead says, contemplate this. Wisconsin is a more progressive senator than California. You're right, except almost every state that has a Democratic senator has a more progressive senator than California. There's only like 3 issues she's theoretically progressive on. Everything else, she's a conservative.
You're being very unfair to her because you're criticizing her.
Yes, very unfair.
Yeah.
With all my facts. Santos Huante writes in, there's only one super party, the donor class. And Dances With says that clip, referring to the Klubeck clip, controlling the Democratic Party, should be on the loop 24/7 till every last voter has seen it and understands the implications. Quote, I own you and your vote. That's exactly what Klubeck was saying. And they're now so brazen and think that they're untouchable that they could just go on TV and say, yeah, I bought the Democrats, so why don't they do as I told them to do? All right, let's go forward.
All right. Roy Moore, the Senate candidate in Alabama, is facing yet another allegation from a woman who claims that she had been sexually assaulted by him decades ago. Now, she said that when she was assaulted by him, she was only 16 years old and working as a waitress in Alabama at a place known as the Old Hickory House, where Roy Moore was a regular customer. Now, she identified herself in a press conference along with her lawyer, Gloria Allred. Her name is Beverly Young Nelson. And the new accuser told a news conference in New York that Mr. Moore attacked her when she was 16 and he was a prosecutor in Etowah County, Alabama. Apparently, he stayed until after closing hours and she was waiting for her boyfriend to pick her up. She says that her boyfriend was late and at that point, Roy Moore offered her a ride home. But instead of taking her home, she claimed that he drove to the back of the restaurant and then assaulted her. She said, I tried fighting him off while yelling at him to stop, but instead of stopping, he began squeezing my neck, attempting to force my head onto his crotch. She said Mr. Moore then warned her that no one will believe you if she told anyone about the encounter in his car. And he essentially told her, look, I'm the district attorney, you're just a teenager. No one's gonna believe your story.
And I just wanna give the exact quote according to her, because it's, he said, you're just a child, I'm the district attorney. If you tell anyone about this, no one will ever believe you. If she's just a child, you might not have wanted to sexually assault her in the back of a parking lot. This is, by the way, a Trump voter. Her husband's a Trump voter. She says this has nothing to do with politics. She's a Republican from Alabama. It's like, but he did this. He did it. He had, quote unquote, flirted with her throughout. When she was 15 years old, working in that restaurant, he would pull on her hair, and he would constantly say, make comments about her appearance and how pretty she was. He was in his 30s, she was 15. She said she was not interested because he was literally more than twice her age.
Yeah, what's interesting is his response to these allegations. Now, he says that he is going to go after the Washington Post because that was the publication that broke the story of all these allegations against him last week. But at the same time, he doesn't really deny these allegations. He just says, yeah, I knew these women and I tried to kiss them. But I didn't do anything wrong.
So let me be clear. So there was the original 4 allegations in the Washington Post story. Today, Beverly Young Nelson is the 5th.
Right.
Of the first 4, he says, yeah, the 16 and 18-year-olds, when I was in my 30s, I dated them because I liked beautiful young girls, including the 16-year-old. And he made out with her, okay? And he says, but that's all. He says the only one he doesn't know is the 14-year-old who says she stripped him down to her underwear, he got naked and tried to get her to touch his crotch and he groped her. He says, that's the one, I just don't have recollection of her. She has a recollection of you. And now even other Republicans say that they believe the women and not Roy Moore.
Right, so one of those Republicans is actually Mitch McConnell. And during a press conference, he addressed this whole controversy, and here's what he had to say.
Before you go, Roy Moore, what's the latest there? Are you calling for him to step down from that Senate race?
I did. I think he should step aside. Yeah.
We're just about out of time. Is the burden on Moore to prove these false versus someone to prove that these are true in this situation? Or do you believe these allegations to be true?
I believe the women, yes.
Wow.
That was a pretty strong statement. And there were other statements from other senators that I'll get to in just a minute. But Roy Moore is not buying it. He has responded to Mitch McConnell in the form of a tweet, because that's what people do these days. And he said the person who should step aside is Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. He has failed conservatives and must be replaced. # drain the swamp.
I think that's what got him in trouble, right? I said wow because in this day and age, it is surprising, borderline shocking, to have a Republican leader say that he would not support another Republican. Now, in this case, the Republican appears to be a child molester, but even so, it's still shocking because the Republicans have stood by their guys in almost every instance, no matter what. Desjardins in Tennessee, 3 abortions, including with his mistress.
Yeah.
They're like, he's our guy, that's family values. Abortions are no problem when Republicans do it. Mistresses are no problem when Republicans do it. Donald Trump bragging about sexual assault on tape, clear as day.
Right.
They stood by him. So why are they flipping on Roy Moore? Now look, if they flip on him and they try to write-in candidate or something, that is going to be very difficult to pull off. And it looks like the Democrats have an excellent chance of winning this seat now. So why? It's not because all of a sudden the Republicans woke up one day and were like, oh yeah, moral, we forgot to be moral. Like, family values, right, child molestation, bad, right? No, the reason is Virginia. Because of the elections that just happened in Virginia, and they realized Gillespie ran on the Trump thing of, anti-immigrant and the Latinos are coming and the Muslims are coming, et cetera, and it didn't work. And he lost to a really mediocre Democratic candidate, which they had a lot of hope that he would beat. And then they got killed in the lower level elections. And so their conclusion was, maybe Trump can pull off being Trump, but the rest of us can't.
Yeah, so that's actually a really great point. And one thing that you have to keep in mind is that the primary races are very different from running in the general election, right? In these state seats, and in this case, you had Roy Moore go against Luther Strange, who was a more moderate candidate, and Roy Moore won because he did play this extremist Trump card, but that's not necessarily going to resonate with all the people of Alabama. So,
and even so, look, he might, if these allegations didn't come out, he probably would have won anyway. He's even before we had suspected him of being a child molester, he had already said Muslims should not be allowed in Congress. That means you don't believe in the U.S. Constitution, right. And he, let alone his views on gay Americans, et cetera, et cetera. So the Republicans already knew that, and were like, yeah, that's great. Discriminating against Muslims, that's awesome. Discriminating against gays, we love it, no problem at all. And almost certainly would have won in Alabama, but. Remember, all these senators on the Republican side aren't all from Alabama. So one of the first guys to turn was the Republican senator from Colorado. He's not gonna win in Colorado if he's running on a pro-child molester ticket. But no, it's okay, I'm a Christian conservative that will imprison the women if they have abortions. That's not gonna play well in Colorado. So he was like, pull the chute, I saw what happened in Virginia. It turns out Trump thing was an anomaly. I gotta get out of here. Now they're looking to save their own ass.
Also, I just wanted to give some credit to a gentleman on Twitter. I'm sorry your name escapes me at the moment, but I thanked you on Twitter. He made an excellent point about how the GOP launched this war against transgender rights because they were so concerned about trans individuals sexually assaulting women in bathrooms. I mean, projection 101. It's amazing.
It turns out that you didn't have to worry about transgender people. You just had to worry about Republican Senate candidates.
Yeah. All right, and then finally, I just wanted to give Senator Susan Collins some credit because she also called out Roy Moore. Let's go to graphic 9. She says, I have now read Mr. Moore's statement and listened to his radio interview in which he denies the charges. I did not find his denials to be convincing and believe that he should withdraw from the Senate race in Alabama.
Anna, didn't you have an update about the mall? Is that?
I do. Okay, so this broke right before I went on air, so you should read the details for yourself. But the New Yorker is reporting that a mall actually banned Roy Moore because of the fact that he continuously pestered teenage girls. He was badgering them, and so the mall banned him from going there.
Okay, you know what? Just one more time. So Roy Moore caught doing all this terrible things to young women. I mean, the 16-year-old in the car, he's trying to force her head down. She's screaming. Remember, he got kicked out of the Alabama Supreme Court because he got kicked out twice. But the first time was because of the 10 Commandments.
Right.
He said, even though America is supposed to live by a constitution, I don't care. I wanted to live by the 10 Commandments. Where in the 10 Commandments does it talk about molesting young girls and how that's okay? And attacking them and trying to force yourself onto them, okay? I don't remember that in the 10 Commandments. Then the second time he got kicked out of the Alabama Supreme Court is because he said that it was an abomination to give gay people the same rights as straight people, because gay people are immoral. Gay people are immoral. But Roy Moore, who knows that he's been in his words, dating 16-year-olds when he was in his 30s,
right,
is a very moral man, and says the 14-year-old and the other 16-year-old that said that he assaulted them, no, that part's not necessarily true. The 16-year-old, he didn't even quite deny yet, the last one with the one in the car, okay?
Yeah.
So the next time when you see a guy talking about family values, unfortunately, 9 out of 10 times, it means he's a super bad guy. And we've seen this 1,000 times over and over and over again. It's usually the guys with the darkest secrets who keep moralizing to others and judging others and saying that other people are not as morally righteous as they are. And there's a reason why they do that, because they're trying to make sure that nobody finds out what they've been up to. So they just project out. They take their weakness and try to turn it into a strength. Oh, other people are bad with their morals and they do illicit sexual things. Oh, I judge you. No, when you see a guy like Roy Moore next time, God knows what he's done in a car somewhere or in a bathroom, and the sick and depraved things that Republicans like that have been up to while you weren't looking.
All right, let's take a quick break. When we come back, Trump talks about which he trusts more. Is it our intelligence communities or Putin? I'm pretty sure you won't be that surprised. Come right back.
Welcome back to a whole new season of Murder with Friends, the show where two friends get together and talk about the darker sides of history. You guys know that I go all the way on conspiracy theories, so work with me, people. How did the police let that happen?
Because they were corrupt at the time. It was like awful, not that they still aren't.
Statistically, we've all met someone who's murdered someone.
Ah!
It's creepy.
You can't talk about a murderer without going back to his origins. It's Murder with Friends. Don't be scared. You're among friends.
Damn it, they failed us. And if you're not angry about that, Michael, and any of you out there, then you're damn wrong, because you should be angry. Young Turks.
But it was genuine. He was mad.
Cenk Uygur, known online as one of the Young Turks, isn't afraid to throw some punches.
3, 2, 1, fade up.
I just remember thinking, what is this guy's name?
Cenk the Turk Uygur.
What kind of TV station is this? The whole point is for me to yell and scream and tell you what I think.
It was right out of like Wayne's World.
This guy on this little rinky-dink website is speaking truth to power.
We've been averaging 600,000 views a day, beating most of the cable shows in America.
We're the largest online news show in the world.
We're celebrating our 1 billionth view.
Television, we're coming.
More politics ahead with Cenk Uygur.
He knew that the MSNBC opportunity was an experiment.
a fill-in host beats CNN and Headline News combined. At some point, they want to give me a show.
Every single year, that comes out of our paycheck. We put it in, and you're saying we were suckers.
When you, as a host, tells someone you're interviewing to shut up, that's going to raise a red flag.
That guy needed a tall glass of shut-up juice.
If President Obama's doing the wrong thing, I'm not going to tell you that he's doing the right thing so I can, quote, support him.
He says to me, "You won't believe the meeting that I just had."
The head of MSNBC talked to me.
They want him off the air.
Cenk took an incredible risk.
We're supposed to challenge the government. That's the role of the media. The Democrats and the Republicans are here to screw you. And who on the air is saying it?
I wouldn't have done what he did.
That if I'm going to be a talk show host, I should be the biggest talk show host in the country. I don't think anyone else does it better. I don't think anyone's even close.
Before you know it, I'll be back on your TV doing a national show. I guarantee it.
Can we eat in here?
All right, back on the Young Turks. Unregistered Chicano writes in, Anna Kasparian's got that Demi Moore in the 80s voice going. Feel better soon.
Thank you.
Yeah, you are a trooper for fighting through it.
Yeah, thank you.
Of course, no, thank you. Michael Shore, wait a minute, our own Michael Shore writes in, 50 pastors signed letter of support for Roy Moore. Family values. Okay, I wonder who's those pastors have locked up in their basements. Okay, Hassan Piker says, when Roy Moore wins because all this press caused the evangelical base to redouble and come out in numbers, we'll hear about GOP tribalism. I've been saying this for a minute. So that's our own Haas, and he's right. He's potentially right about that too. I don't know, we'll see what winds up. Doug Jones, they say, is now up in the polls, and especially if they split the Republican vote by doing a write-in candidate, I can't imagine that the Republicans could win if they split the vote. But on the other hand, if Roy Moore continues and there is no write-in candidate, that race is not over.
Yeah.
That, believe me, there's a lot of Alabama Republicans who think, I mean, the girls are cute at kind of 14, and they do. And
I think that evangelical activism, especially during 2016, should be a cautionary tale. People need to go out and vote.
Yeah, and I think that evangelical voters generally don't care, have proven that they don't care about morality at all. It's just a matter of who they hate. And Roy Moore hates the same people as them. He hates Muslims, he hates gays. They're like, good enough, man. I don't give a shit what you did to a 14-year-old. So we'll find out. Michael Corno writes in, I would really like to believe that voters will shun Moore, but his supporters here are rallying around him because someone has them convinced that the liberal media is fake news. So look, more than the couple of guys who've elected officials in Alabama who've literally come out and said, even if it's true, I don't care. That, that it's okay. It's okay to molest 14-year-olds. Other than those guys, most of them will get themselves to believe that it's not true because the press said it.
It's fake news.
It's everything that the press reports is fake news to them by definition. That's why the Republicans and Trump have been attacking the media for this long, so that when they get in trouble, people won't believe it. Okay, what's next?
All right. Donald Trump addressed whether or not he trusts the US intelligence community over Putin's word. And unsurprisingly, he was very clear that if Putin says that he didn't meddle in the election, then he's gonna go ahead and believe Putin. Let me give you his exact quotes. He was quoted as saying that, hey, he said he didn't meddle. I asked him again. You can only ask so many times. Every time he sees me, he says, I didn't do that. And I really believe that when he tells me that, he means it. So again, Trump there is talking about Putin. And he's like, well, I asked him if he meddled, and he's saying no. So I'm gonna go ahead and believe him.
Okay, so a couple of things here. Number one, they then asked Putin's press secretary, Dmitry Peskov, did they discuss elections and meddling when Putin and Trump talked? And he said, no, they never discussed it. So that's interesting. Either the Russians are lying for some bizarre reason when Trump is trying to cover for them, or Trump just said that Putin denied it, even though they never even talked about it. Do you think that Trump actually went and asked Putin for the third time? He didn't ask. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a small part of it. You could say, no, the Russians are lying. They're always liars. Except Trump says, no, Putin told me a couple of times. Why would Putin lie? So to me, that's even more. Come on, you're a Trump supporter. If you are, you think Putin's always telling the truth? And then if you just ask a guy who's ordered the execution of journalists and political opponents, hey, are you telling the truth? And he says, yes, I am, that you should believe him. Come, I hope you're not even that stupid. Are you that stupid?
No, look, I want to reiterate that there needs to be more emphasis on Trump's financial dealings with the Russians, okay? Because all the emphasis on this special counsel and this investigation has to do with possible collusion, because that's what the DNC and the Democrats are obsessed with, right? They want to prove that there's collusion, to come up with excuses and not have to take ownership of the fact that they had a terrible candidate and they need to change their ways. What's more concerning to me is whether or not there are financial dealings here that lead to a gigantic conflict of interest, and whether or not that is influencing Trump's behavior in regard to Russia and Putin, right? Because it just seems so obvious to me. Homeboy won't release his tax returns. Release your tax returns. Why is he so afraid to release them?
And he attacks everyone except Putin.
Exactly.
When it comes to Putin, all of a sudden he's like, oh, all of a sudden he's a beta and a cuck. So say, oh, Putin said it, I believe him. Putin is such a good guy. Why would Putin lie? I asked him 2 times, I can't ask him anymore. Hey, what do you owe him, money? Oh, maybe.
Oh, there's more though, there's more. Let me give you some more of his quotes. Again, this is Trump talking about Putin. He says, I mean, give me a break. They are political hacks, referring to our intelligence communities, okay? So he's talking about Jim Clapper and John Brennan. So you look at it, I mean, you have Brennan, you have Clapper, and you have Comey. Comey is proven now to be a liar, and he is proven now to be a leaker. So you look at that, and you have President Putin very strongly, vehemently says that he had nothing to do with them. Oh, okay, so Putin says that he had nothing to do with it, so let's just go ahead and believe him over our own intelligence organizations. Keep in mind, like, you hear accusations of unpatriotic behavior from the right wing in regard to those on the left over and over again. You don't support every war, you're unpatriotic. You don't do everything that the right wing wants, you're unpatriotic. You have the president of the United States basically talking crap about our own intelligence community and putting Vladimir Putin on a pedestal. It's insane.
So look, you can say, hey, didn't those guys work for Obama, the ones that Trump named? Yes, but they also worked for Republicans. So throughout their entire careers, and And I have criticized Clapper and Brennan to no end because they were part of the warrantless wiretapping. It started under Bush. It continued under Obama. They've messed with our rights over and over again. And we've been consistent on our criticism of what our intelligence community is doing wrong. James Comey is a right-winger. James Comey was the #2 person at John Ashcroft's Justice Department under George W. Bush. He's a massive right-winger. So now he has investigated Republicans and Democrats, which I think is fair to give him credit for. And he has stood up to Republicans and Democrats at different times in his career. And I think that there's some reason to give him credit for that. And if you said to me, hey, do you trust everything those three said? I'd say no way. It depends on what are we talking about, warrantless wiretapping or et cetera, right? But if you said to me, do you believe those guys or the guy in Russia who has taken over the government, imprisoned all of his political opponents, murdered some of them, murdered any journalist who dared to expose what he's doing, stripped local democracy away from the Russian government, that's a no-brainer. And so yes, of course we care about the particulars of this particular case, but there is no evidence that would lead a reasonable human being to say, no, if Putin says that he is telling the truth, by definition, he must be telling the truth. Whereas our own intelligence guys are all liars on every issue, including this one. That's a preposterous statement. If a Democrat had gone around saying our intelligence agents are all liars, but I love the Russian leader, and since he told me that he's a good guy, I believe him, he would have been tarred and feathered and run out of town, called a communist, a traitor, et cetera, right? He's doing it right in front of our eyes. Again, I always look, if you're not a Trump supporter, you get this is so super obvious to you. But I'm always amazed by the Trump supporters who think like, no, who needs freedom? Have I ever argued for freedom? No, I'm a Republican, I never argued for freedom. Putin being a guy who suppresses freedom in his own country is awesome. That's great. Right. And did I ever say I was for critical thinking? I am not for critical thinking. I will bow my head to Putin and believe whatever he says. I mean, really? Are you really that pathetic?
Well, if you want to talk about the issue of freedom, there is a troubling trend with Trump having this admiration for dictatorial individuals like Putin and Rodrigo Duterte from the Philippines, right? And we're gonna get to that story later, but it worries me who he is more likely to be chummy with and who he's more likely to be insanely critical of. So I wanna get to the second half of this story because there was a response to Trump and his comments. Following Trump's comments regarding his distrust of US intelligence organizations and his trust of Vladimir Putin over these intelligence organizations, Jim Clapper and John Brennan appeared on Jake Tapper's show and shared their thoughts on this whole debacle. And here's what they had to say. Take a look.
Putin is committed to undermining our system, our democracy, and our whole process. And to try to paint it in any other way is, I think, astounding and in fact poses a peril to this country. Apart from that, something we don't think about too much is the fact that the Russians are embarked on a very aggressive modernization of their strategic nuclear forces, to include a very capable and scary counter space program. They only have one adversary in mind when they do this. And oh, by the way, the Russians are in abject violation of the INF Treaty, the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty. So the Russians do not harbor good intentions toward the United States, and there shouldn't be any illusions or any ambiguity about that. And our president fosters that ambiguity.
Yeah, but does Trump owe the Russians money though? Because in my opinion, that is the heart of this controversy. What are Trump's intentions? What are the possible conflicts of interest?
So look, if you, let's just flip to the other side, because this is what I love doing. And as a person who's empathetic, you should think about what if the shoe was on the other foot. So if we had a Democratic leader and he said, well, the Russians are in violation of all these treaties. And by the way, the US Congress has passed sanctions against Russia, and Trump now has gone for about a month and a half and not imposed those sanctions. He's just not doing it. It's unbelievable. It's almost as if he owes the guy something, right?
Right.
He will not go counter to the wishes of his boss, almost under any circumstance. But anyway, if you had a Democrat who came in and the Russians are doing all this, And then the Republican former intelligence guys go, well, look, we're worried about Russian interference. And the Democrat, Obama, Bernie, whoever goes, no, I trust Putin. I trust Putin completely. He told me twice, and now I believe him, and I believe him more than our own intelligence guys because he's Putin. I'd be like, whoa, that's really weird.
Yeah.
Right, and I'd say, wait, there's something wrong here.
Right, and I think that the difference in response is interesting here because, if you go back to Obama's administration, we were not kind to Obama. We criticized him where he deserved to be criticized. When that whole NSA leak came out with Edward Snowden, we were highly critical of him. We were highly critical when the Affordable Care Act was being worked out in Congress. I mean, it's just the right thing to do. It's not about party identity. It's about making sure that you criticize your party and your candidate when they're doing wrong. And in this case, Trump is like completely immune to criticism from Republicans.
And for those two guys, Clapper and Brennan that are in that segment, I've criticized over and over. So I don't trust them wholeheartedly. I think that they have been greatly misleading on a number of issues, including warrantless wiretapping. So I'm not a naive guy who goes, oh, well, it's an intelligence guy. He must be telling the truth, right? But to say that you just unilaterally believe Putin over them with no evidence just because Putin wouldn't tell a lie, that's you might have mental issues.
So let's just quickly hear from John Brennan and what he has to say about Trump getting played by Putin.
At one point, President Trump said he thinks Vladimir Putin is insulted by the suggestion and the conclusion by the intelligence agencies that Russia interfered in the US election. What do you make of that, his bringing up that Putin feels insulted?
Well, I think Mr. Putin is very clever in terms of playing to Mr. Trump's interest in being flattered. And also, I think Mr. Trump is, for whatever reason, either intimidated by Mr. Putin, afraid of what he could do or what might come out as a result of these investigations. So it's very worrisome, and I think it sends a worrisome, very disturbing signal to our allies and partners who are concerned about Russian interference in their democratic processes as well. So it's either naivete, ignorance, or fear in terms of what Mr. Trump is doing vis-a-vis the Russians.
No, it's over, man. They're gonna get Trump. Putin is his boss. Every interaction, it's the clearest thing I've ever seen. In fact, if a lower level employee did that to his actual boss, it'd be embarrassing. Like if you walk into the room, oh, Mr. Putin, of course you're right, Mr. Putin. And especially a guy who's a bully, who bullies everyone else around. He sees the Russian leader and all of a sudden, he's the biggest cuck you've ever seen. He's like, oh yes, please, Melania, whatever you want, please. Of course you're right about everything, right? What Brendan referred to there is that, hey, is he afraid that Putin is going to reveal something? Yeah, that's the former head of the CIA. Okay, the Russians definitely have compromat on Trump, and
that's what it seems like.
Yeah, there's no way that Trump grovels like that unless Putin has something on him that is devastating. Trump is not a groveler; he's a bully. That's not what he does. And so when he grovels, you know, that guy's got something on him. All right, it's a little premature, but hold for it.
It's not coming soon enough. Like the slow and steady drip is driving me crazy. So we'll see how this develops.
Get a Keurig machine, you'll be fine.
All right.
Good drip.
We got to take another break. When we come back, the handshake story that I'm sure you've all been waiting for. I've been honest with him, like, yeah, I was upset with you and I shouldn't have done it. But instead I was like, I'm just trying to protect my engagement ring.
Greek had a referendum asking the voters, hey.
T-minus 1 minute till landing. TYT broadcast controllers, listen up. Give me a go, no go for landing. Sound?
Audio is hovering at minus 12 decibels. We're go.
Streaming?
We're go.
Camera crew?
We're a go.
Mission control?
We're go.
Snacks?
We're good.
Iguana? Sir? We are go for landing. Okay, everybody. I want this to go off without a hitch.
Sir, I've been looking over this joke for the past hour, and with the Bannon firing now weeks old and waning interest.
English, Johnson, English. What are you trying to tell me?
This joke isn't going to land, sir.
Okay, everyone. Forget the old plan. From this moment on, we're improvising a new joke.
So this is where the show started, and this is where it was supposed to end. Now the joke was supposed to land here, but that's not gonna happen, obviously. So we need to come up with a new joke. Maybe here?
Hits are dropping, streams are failing, retweets are stopping.
40 seconds.
All right, team. We gotta find a way to make this fit into a joke about this that will appeal to them.
30 seconds.
The Trump joke's our safest option.
Trying to land a Trump joke after this week's events is a suicide mission.
We are officially out of time. We need to act now.
Sir, I think our best course of action is to let Cenk try to land a dad joke.
That's the deal?
That's the deal.
All right, everyone, to their stations.
Led by Germany, and some of the creditor nations like Netherlands and Finland.
Cameras, position, social media team.
Brace for unfollows. 10 seconds. As for the rest of us, all any of us can do now is wait and hope.
This is gonna be the worst disaster TYT has ever experienced.
With all due respect, sir, I think this will be the finest hour 2 yet.
Giving mood. Angela Merkel's government seems to have signaled pronounced.
Come on, Cenk.
Everyone, it's been a pleasure streaming with you.
Greek Prime Minister immediately picked up the phone to Putin and said, "You Putin any money in?" Okay, anyway.
TYT crew, the joke has landed.
All right, back on the Young Turks, Cenk and Anna with you. Members of the day are Hal Duncan and Haley Stoneham. Hal was one of the producers of Mad as Hell, which we showed you a clip from earlier in the show if you're watching live. So God bless. Thank you, guys. Anna and I went to Portugal for the Web Summit last week. That's where she got the hoarse voice. And we'll tell you some awesome stories from Portugal in the postgame today. So members not only support the show, they get the full 2 hours and other network shows without ads, plus the postgame.
Just a little bit of a tease for the postgame. I am going to make a strong argument that because of your wife and because of me, you had way more fun than you would have on that show.
There will be a strong argument.
Very strong, and I have evidence. So.
And when we were in Portugal, there was some strong drinking.
Oh my God, I forgot about that.
Yes, we'll tell you all about that in the post game if you're a member. So to become a member, tytnetwork.com/join. All right, Holdcraft says Pootie Poo always tells the truth. That was, of course, no, it's actually not Pootie Poo. It's Pootie Poot. That was George Bush's nickname for Putin. What is it with the Republican idiots
with their nicknames?
That immediately fall in love with Putin
because they see him as strong. Like, I don't know, they're turned on by that.
Yeah. To be fair, Bob F. makes a good point. He says, say what you will about Putin, but he was really good in Casino Royale and Skyfall. And Becky Armstrong says, when you start watching random YouTube video half hour before the show to waste time and then miss the first hour, sad face. Fado. Okay, we'll explain what Fado is in the post game. You'll love it. You'll make up for missing some of the show. Well, first of all, if you're a member, you can just watch it later. tytnetwork.com/strong. Okay.
Join, not strong.
Oh, that's such a funny Freudian slip. Yes, I'm sure that should lead to something good too. All right, last one, because it's important. Michael Ritchie says, I don't know of any intelligence professionals that dodged the draft in Vietnam with bone spurs. You know, TYT Investigates actually just looked into that issue. And I don't know if you guys know this. I don't think I knew this. You know, there is no letter from the doctor in the records. So the Selective Service records, Trump claims that he got a deferment because he had a letter from his doctor about his bone spurs. He says he doesn't remember which foot they were in or what the doctor's name was. But there is no letter in his records. So it's just what the fucking powerful get away with.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right, let's go to the next fun story.
All right. Trump made a lot of news during his tour to Asia and during the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. It was a summit in the Philippines. There was this fun little ritual or tradition that they do where world leaders do this handshake. And it's not really that complicated. Right hand over left hand, and then you do a handshake with the world leaders next to you. And it's supposed to show unity. However, Trump seemed to struggle a little bit with that, and it made some news. So without further ado, let's take a look at the video.
And now for the ASEAN handshake. Right over left in 1, 2, and 3.
Okay, first of all, that's super awkward. And to be fair to Trump, I think I probably would have screwed it up.
No, I know. Look, I don't really care. I think most people would, because you're like, I don't know. It's awkward as it is, and maybe they didn't hear the instructions when it was read.
No, like that's the only tiny criticism of Trump in that.
Right.
That he doesn't do any of his homework. Like if they told him, like I'm sure they tell the president, hey, by the way, you're going to do this awkward handshake where you're like doing this, right? And he's like, yeah, it's not in a tweet. I don't care, right?
Yeah,
I would have been like, wait, what are we doing? Which hand? What? Okay, and I'm awkward with physical stuff, so I would have been like, okay, which one goes over which? Anyway, let's show you the pictures because most people, we're actually more fair to Trump because most people haven't seen the video and they're seeing the pictures and this looks awesome and hilarious.
I know. I think my favorite thing about it is his facial expressions.
Of course.
Because, he that face. He realized he got it wrong. And, I think he made the same kind, not the same kind of face, but most people when they're struggling with something publicly will make a face. And Trump is very expressive. And so if you watch the video, he makes like this face before he does like this ridiculous fake smile. It's like,
he's so awkward, dude. But they should cut this handshake out.
I agree.
This unity in Asia, I'm not buying it.
Yeah,
there's better ways to do unity. Look, everybody's struggling with it. Look at that face. Look at that face.
No, it's the best part.
Okay, this story does not mean much. Okay,
no.
So don't make much of it. It's just fun. That's all.
Yes. All right, but you should make much of the next story because it shows you who Trump seems to have deep admiration for. During Donald Trump's tour in Asia, he met with Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte. And interestingly enough, he seemed to be incredibly chummy with Duterte, who has been a controversial figure considering the fact that he has been very supportive and has encouraged extrajudicial killings of individuals who are addicted to drugs. Now, the Philippines have an issue with drug addiction. So does the United States, and the approach here in the United States has been to, stop criminalizing people who are addicted to painkillers and heroin and get them the help that they need to recover. In the Philippines, it's a completely different story. Thousands of people have been killed in extrajudicial killings, some by police officers, others by vigilantes, and it has been disastrous because there's no due process in these cases. Now, Trump, though, has praised Duterte for his organization of the summits, saying that he handled them beautifully. He also said, we had a great relationship. This has been very successful. Trump also said that he had enjoyed being here, meaning with Duterte in the Philippines. Now, there's another part of their meeting that is a little disturbing. Both Duterte and Trump have a deep disdain for the media. And so as reporters were being escorted out of the room, one asked if Trump would raise the issue of human rights, to which Duterte jokingly called the media spies. At that point, both laughed, but neither answered the question.
Yeah. So there's a number of issues here. First, on the so-called drug war that Duterte is running, about 100,000 people have been killed, and you think like, oh, it's gang warfare and stuff, and sure, I'm sure that that's some part of it, but mainly it's actually the cops doing the killing. And so Amnesty International accuses the police of shooting defenseless people. Not only that, the police paying assassins to murder not drug dealers, but addicts.
Yeah, people who are addicted to drugs. And as again, we're experiencing here in the United States, this is something that should be met with decriminalization and with rehabilitation, because people get addicted to drugs for all sorts of reasons. They're not bad people because they're addicted to drugs. This is terrible.
So now, look, the US doesn't have completely clean hands by a long shot. We're the people who started the war on drugs in the first place, and it's been an absolute debacle. And of course, now we're talking about rehabilitation because it's affecting wider cross-section of Americans. Back when it was mainly black people they were locking up, then they weren't talking about as a health issue. They were talking about, we're gonna throw them away. So we got plenty of skeletons in our closet, no question about that. But Duterte is definitely a different level. Just last year, he said that we should kill the 3 million addicts in the Philippines. Kill them, murder them, the addicts.
I have his exact quote, which is shocking. He said he'd be happy to slaughter 3 million addicts, slaughter them. And he's made a number of these comments, and it emboldens the vigilantes, it emboldens the cops. And even if someone thinks, no, drug addicts should be criminalized, well, what about due process? What about a trial? Extrajudicial killings imply that there is no trial, there is no day in court, there's nothing. You can be accused, and as soon as you're accused, because you're emboldened by the leader of the country, you can go out and just kill someone for being addicted to drugs or allegedly addicted to drugs. You can just go out there and kill someone you don't like and accuse them of being addicted to drugs.
Of course, that's why the killing is absolutely out of control in the Philippines. And so now, Trump, while on the campaign trail, pretended to care about the opioid problem in America. And he pretended to empathize with the families of those who were addicted. Now he's going and embracing a guy who says we should kill anyone who's addicted to any kind of drug. So if your family's been affected by the disaster in this country that opioids have wreaked, and you thought Trump was gonna help you, he just embraced a guy who says your family members should be murdered. And so Duterte just last week in another Asian summit in Vietnam bragged about how he personally killed someone when he was 16 years old.
So let's read you that quote, graphic 22. He said, at the age of 16, I already killed someone, a real person, a rumble, a stabbing. I was just 16 years old. It was just over a look. So he's bragging about murdering people. And it's just so fascinating to me to see who Trump shows admiration for. People who have this dictatorial streak, people like Duterte, people like, Vladimir Putin, who, viciously go after their opponents, in some cases murdering their opponents. I mean, why is it that Trump has this deep admiration for them, but when it comes to other world leaders like Angela Merkel, he's just vicious toward them? It's fascinating to me. I don't know.
And then finally on the issue of the press, so Duterte calls them spies, and if you don't know Duterte's history, you might think, okay, whatever, he doesn't like the press. A lot of Republicans don't like the press because they actually cover facts from time to time. But understand that there's a difference even between Trump and Duterte. Trump has said it's frankly disgusting the press is able to write whatever it wants to write, because Trump is a person who's never read the US Constitution. That is an absolute guarantee in the Constitution, but he doesn't care, he's a wannabe dictator. But Duterte has said, just because you're a journalist, you are not exempted from assassination if you're a son of a bitch. Freedom of expression cannot help you if you have done something wrong. So this is a guy who has encouraged the assassination of journalists. So when he says all of you people in the press are spies, it is not a laughing matter. The Philippines now unfortunately ranks as the 3rd worst country for killing of journalists, only behind Syria and Iraq, and those journalists died in war zones. Duterte has created the war zone where he is encouraging the assassination of his critics in the press.
Right.
And not character assassination, actual murder assassination. So it is not remotely a laughing matter. If you say Trump doesn't know that because he's an idiot, okay, I guess that's your big defense. My president that I like doesn't do any homework, is a moron, doesn't know who he's yucking it up with, and saying he's a wonderful person. Every part of Trump is, again, with Putin, Duterte, just loves the strongmen who are dictators who murder political opponents and the press, and thinks it's a wonderful thing to compliment them over and over and laugh with them. And by the way, after the laughing was done, Duterte said, "I'm not joking," and pointed to the press and said, "You are, like you are spies." He's not joking, he's called for their murder. And Trump's like, this is great, man, why can't I do this?
Yeah. Oh, it's so devastating. But look, I don't even think that his base makes excuses for him. I don't think that they even consider him ignorant to what's going on. My read of it is, and this is based on that poll that was done by Politico and Morning Consult earlier this month. There's a deep disdain toward the media among the right wingers that support Trump. They believe, 76% of Republicans believe that the media just fabricates stories about Trump. So they're buying Trump's narrative hook, line, and sinker. And if you just look at history and what dictatorial leaders have done in the past, first thing they want to do is dismantle free media, free press.
Yeah. So look, as I've said a million times, I think our mainstream press has an establishment bias. I don't want them killed, right? I don't want you to think that the press doesn't cover anything that's true. That's ridiculous. So from time to time, is it fair for the left wing and the right wing to point out some bias that they might have? Of course. Is it true that they just wholesale make things up regularly? Like the New York Times doesn't bother doing any research, they just go get in a room and go, what shall we invent?
Yeah.
Right, and just writes fake stories all day long. You'd have to be comically stupid to believe that, or just to be fair, I keep saying stupid, and maybe that's not fair. Just detached from reality. They really are. Like if you said the guys that go and write, and more importantly, the editors at the New York Times might have a perspective and a bias that they are not even conscious of, I think that's a super fair point.
Right.
Even if you think it's a liberal bias, I don't agree, but even if you think that, I think that's a perfectly legitimate point to make, and we disagree on that. If you say, no, they just get in a room and go, what story shall we invent today?
Yeah.
Not look at any facts, not do research, let's just make up news stories. Cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, you don't live on this planet. And 76%, 3/4 of Republicans have lost their fucking minds.
I know, it's insane. All right, moving on to other news. Last week, Donald Trump made news when he nominated a a federal district judge in Alabama who doesn't have much experience. His name is Brett Talley. He has been working as a lawyer for about 3 years, has never actually tried a specific case. So he's incredibly unqualified for this position. He's again practiced law for 3 years, was approved by the Senate Judiciary Committee despite never having tried a case. Well,
to be fair, Anna, he was a blogger. He was a blogger.
Okay, so he's totally qualified to be a federal judge.
By the way, I've also been a blogger. And I was a lawyer for 9 months in total.
How did you never get nominated for the Supreme Court? That's crazy.
And actually, if you include my internships at the prosecutor's office, it's almost a year that I was a lawyer, and I would actually go inside a courtroom. I'm more qualified to be a federal judge than this guy.
It's insane. Okay. Well, the big update to this story is that he failed to disclose the fact that there's a gigantic conflict of interest here because of who he's married to. It turns out that his wife is a White House lawyer. In fact, she is the chief of staff to the White House counsel. Okay, so let's tell you who she is. Her name is Ann Donaldson. Again, this is something that he was supposed to disclose and he failed to do so. And so I don't know what's gonna happen now, but you should also know that he was deemed unqualified by the American Bar Association. And what stands out to me is that whenever we have conversations about people getting special treatment when they don't earn things, it's always in the context of affirmative action, right? But when it comes to stuff like this, whatever, he didn't earn it, but he's a white dude, so who cares?
Yeah, well, it's deeper than that. So let me tell you a couple more things about him. So he worked for Luther Strange, and Luther Strange was briefly the senator from Alabama when Jeff Sessions stepped down, until Roy Moore defeated Strange in the primary. So presumably Luther Strange will be out of the Senate soon. But anyway, those senators are very powerful in helping picking these federal judges. And so that's one thing, but that happens all the time, to be fair, okay? And Democrats do it too. Hey, I like this guy, I'm gonna appoint him, right? And then number two, now getting far more relevant, Brett Talley himself worked at the part of the Justice Department that helped pick judicial appointments. He's like, ooh, I got a great idea. Okay, me, just appoint me. He pulled a Cheney, appointed himself, right? But we knew all that stuff. The reason why this is a news story is because he did not disclose that his wife is chief of staff to the White House counsel, which could be really relevant in picking federal judges.
Right.
And why did you hide that? I mean, that's clearly not something like, oh, she was working at the DMV, I didn't think to fill that out. I mean, no, that's super relevant to the proceedings here.
Yeah, I think it's at this point standard operating procedure in the Trump administration or the Trump era. You just don't disclose your conflicts of interest. Who cares? Who cares about conflicts of interest? Our president is just a walking, talking conflict of interest. So why would this guy worry about, telling anyone or disclosing who his wife is?
Yeah, he thought, well, then there's new rules. The Trump rules are you could just cheat. And so I'm going to cheat and leave that off. Jared Kushner left off unbelievable things. Wilbur Ross left off unbelievable. Wilbur Ross, the Secretary of Commerce, left off $2 billion that he hid somewhere. And then later when he was asked about it at Forbes magazine, hey, you dropped $2 billion in wealth. What happened to the $2 billion? He's like, well, I just transferred it to other people. I'm not gonna tell you who, but it's okay. It's not a conflict of interest, so that's why I didn't record it. They're like, so you're actually now only have 770 million? He's like, no, I don't want anybody to think that I don't have that money. Why? Because he wants to be higher on the Forbes list. Oh, they're unbelievable. So where's the goddamn money? So they're all doing it. It's the swamp at large. But one more thing, particularly about this guy, Trump has appointed 59 people to the court. The Republicans who blocked 100 nominees under the last 2 years of Obama. They're approving every single one of them, right? But only 4 out of the 59, to be fair, were ranked unqualified, okay? So 55 were not, they were ranked qualified by the American Bar Association, right? This guy was declared unanimously unqualified. Like not a single person thought he was qualified for the office. And the Republicans are like, party line vote, yep, totally approved, lovely, let's move forward. Right-wing blogger who thought, by the way, in his blog, someone said that we should pick up arms against the government if we don't agree with them, okay? Meaning to a violent assault on government officials. And he said he agrees. And now that guy's gonna be a federal judge.
Fun. How do you get deemed unqualified? Like you have all the cards stacked in your deck. That's the phrase, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like how do you mess that up? How do you mess that up? How do you mess that up? You're like super connected and super privileged and that this is your wife. Like how do you mess that up? I just don't get it. Oh, okay. That's it. That's all I have to say about that.
That's all she has to say about that. All right, when we come back, oh no, George H.W. Bush. More accusations of groping, and the age of the people being groped is going lower and lower.
Yeah.
Oh, this is bad. We'll talk about it when we come back.
Game of Thrones, which will be back next year, is up for Emmys. They should just give everyone an Emmy in Game of Thrones, send them home.
Yeah, and then have the rest of the Emmys for
Absolutely.
everybody else. But then I was thinking about like, what would I be married with? And it's like, maybe like my Roku remote and my cell phone.
Are you happy he's going back to jail?
Handing out advice to people like he's gonna diversify your funds and stuff like that. Kind of like Shawshank Redemption. Yeah, that's what I think.
That's it. He like raises the price of prison cigarettes by 5,000%.
Hey, Jack.
I have 5 minutes. Explain the Facebook. Go.
Aaron Wysocki, the commander of the armies of the East.
So for those who don't know, Aaron is actually Cenk's favorite employee.
Aaron, what do you like better? Sarabies or Sarabies? Go. Aaron, I want to do a YouTube live clip, but not live. Go. Hi, Aaron, I'm confused. Is it Cenk Uygur or Cenk Uygur? Go.
What I think a lot of people at TYT, and certainly in the audience, don't know is that without Aaron, none of this happened.
Yeah, it's all because of me.
So Aaron, what would you do to surface the Young Turks, as they say?
Well, the first thing I did around that is we didn't have a video podcast back in those days. It was only an audio version, and I wanted a video. I wanted to watch it at work in video form, so I just created the video podcast. So this is the free version of the video podcast that still exists today. I created that from scratch. So I would take the YouTube clip and rip it illegally back then off of YouTube and just put it up on iTunes.
What were the things you did to popularize the Young Turks and get?
So one of the very early things that I liked was not necessarily the show, it was Cenk's blogs. I really enjoyed reading those blogs and I wanted to share them as widely as possible. So at the time there was a big wave of what they called social bookmarking back then. And so what it meant was like you pull links from, this is Reddit. What Reddit is today, it was much more popular back then and there were many different websites.
It wasn't until just a couple years ago when Cenk and I were traveling together, we would share a hotel room. Yeah. 2 grown men sharing a little hotel room. I was like, how much longer do we have to do this? This is
You're gonna be in there much longer?
No, seriously. I'm like, oh, geez, he's in the bathroom again. So I have to go downstairs and use the lobby bathroom. Like that kind of stuff. Like that's the kind of family that we had, right? I mean, but I think
that was such a smart decision though, because you know what it did? You found people that were dedicated to the company, and in a startup in those early days, you need to find people like that.
Absolutely.
He's a war hero. 5.5 years. He's a war hero because he was captured. I like people that weren't captured, okay?
He said I had small hands. They're not small, are they? I never heard that one before.
All right, back on the Young Turks. You know what? In the postgame, I'll add a really funny, cute story about my kids and how they taught me how to cook this weekend.
Oh, awesome.
They're like, Baba. Anyway, tytnetwork.com/join. All right, Bill O Falafel writes in on YouTube Super Chat, and I read Steven Garcia's comment from YouTube Super Chat too. If you use that, you help the show and we read your comments. He writes in, why did the iguana cross the road to get to TYT? We do show the iguana a lot in the live show breaks, and that's Mary Iguana. All right, Richard says, check out Annie Kasparin nailing the Duterte pronunciation, even with a sore throat. #professional.
Thank you.
Super last thing, which is awesome, says Trump smiles like he's worried that someone noticed that he farted.
Yes, that smile is the best.
All right, what's next, Anna?
All right. A sixth woman has come forward with sexual assault allegations against former President George H.W. Bush. The only difference between the latest allegation is the age in which this woman alleges that she was groped. Now, this allegedly happened back in 2003. Her name is Rosalind Corrigan, and she said that the alleged incident occurred during an event that she attended with her parents in 2003 at the CIA's offices in the Woodlands, Texas, when she and her parents posed for a photo with Bush. This is a common theme among all the other allegations. Bush was 79 at the time. Corrigan said he groped her behind. So let me give you her exact quotes. She said, as soon as the picture was being snapped, the 1, 2, 3, he dropped his hands from my waist down to my buttocks and gave it a nice ripe squeeze, which would account for the fact that in the photograph, my mouth is hanging wide open. I was like, oh my goodness, what just happened? Now, she was only 16 at the time. So keep in mind, you're talking about a former president of the United States, allegedly groping a 16-year-old. She was incredibly intimidated. She didn't know what to do.
She said at the time, what does a teenager say to the ex-president of the United States?
I mean, I would be terrified. I wouldn't say anything. I would handle it the same way that she did, to be quite honest with you. And the incredible thing is, spokespeople from Bush's camp aren't denying it. They're like, yeah, he thought it was good-natured and there was nothing wrong with it. Let me give you their quote. George Bush simply does not have it in his heart to knowingly cause anyone harm or distress. And he again apologizes to anyone he may have offended during a photo op.
Okay, so if you watch the show a long time, you know that I have a soft spot for Poppy, so I'm a little biased. And if you wonder why, there's two things that George Bush did that were principled, George H.W. Bush, that his son didn't have anywhere near the principle of. So one, he had said, read my lips, no new taxes, but when he thought the budget was out of control, he raised taxes, and knowing that it would cost him politically, and it did. And it was the right thing to do. And he didn't go into Iraq, he did Kuwait, and there's a million things that he did wrong, okay? But everybody put a world of pressure on him to go into Iraq, and he said, it's gonna be a mess, I'm not gonna do it, that's not why we're here. So I respect those decisions of his. So you're just giving you background so you know why I don't view him as I do the current day Republicans. Now, but in the case, that's not at all relevant to this story. I'm just giving you my bias, okay? In this case, I think it's not the bias. I think that it's me genuinely asking the question of, is it different when it's someone that is that old and doesn't know how wrong it is? All right, it's not
an excuse.
No, it's not remotely an excuse. What I'm asking is it different? So here, I'll give you, okay, so this is super uncomfortable, but the Roy Moore example, right? So Roy Moore, when he was in his 30s, and he's not nearly as old as George H.W. Bush, meaning that he didn't grow up in that era, he grew up kind of in our era, right? And so now Roy Moore is not a spring chicken, but he more modern era. Anyway, so he was 32 when he is groping 16-year-olds to try to sleep with them, right? As opposed to George H.W. Bush, who's 79 and then in his 80s, and grabbing them from the wheelchair and then making a joke, the joke he always made, and he did this all the time, and he did it in front of his wife and everyone else, is my favorite magician is David Copperfield. So That to me says, at least in his mind, he doesn't think he's doing anything wrong. Because he's publicly announcing it. He's like Roy Moore grabs him in the back of a parking lot. He's doing this out in public. You see what I'm saying? So it's definitely different. The question is, I guess, does that matter? It doesn't matter. No, he's horribly guilty.
Well, look,
you see what I'm saying?
I do see what you're saying, and I think bad actors who act poorly in a variety of situations will justify to themselves that what they're doing is not that bad. Now, this is an extreme example, but Rodrigo Duterte in the Philippines thinks that it's totally okay to have extrajudicial killings of drug addicts, right? Mm-hmm. And in his head, he's doing something good. Now, in Bush's head, maybe he thinks what he's doing is innocent. But what this says to me and what it communicates to me is this sense of entitlement to put your hands on any other individual without consent and think that it's totally okay, right? Don't put your hands on people. Just don't touch people. You are not into, I don't care if you're the president of the United States. I don't care what kind of power you yield. You do not have the ability to go ahead and just grope people, grab people, any way you like, whenever you like.
Yeah, and so let me be clear about two things. One, there's no excuse for it, so don't do it, okay? So we're not negotiating about whether he's allowed to do it. He's definitely not allowed to do it. Furthermore, if you're the ex-president of the United States, you have a further responsibility to not do it because you hold power over people. Here's a 16-year-old girl intimidated by your power, so you don't abuse that power. You should go further out of your way to make sure you're not doing it. I guess what I'm talking about is consequences. Mm-hmm. If I'm at a Thanksgiving get together and some creeper from is cornering a 16-year-old when he's 32 and we catch him, like I'm turning him over to the cops, right? If an 79-year-old grandpa is kidding around, David Copperfield, as we're taking a picture in front of everybody and grabs an ass, you're pulling him aside going, Gramps, you're not allowed to do that. That's crazy. Don't ever do that again. But you're not turning him over to the cops. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's hard to say what my reaction would be in that situation because, look, it's interesting because prior to experiencing this exact thing myself, I didn't see it as that big of a deal. I'm being completely honest. Like, okay, it's an ass grab. It's not the end of the world. Because when you hear about sexual assault and when you hear about rape, some of the allegations are so brutal and so terrible that it makes something like an ass grab seem innocent. And then when I experienced it myself, you feel so violated, right? And you feel like you start questioning yourself, right? Am I doing something wrong? Am I dressed inappropriately? Am I carrying myself a certain way? Do I look slutty? And you start feeling really bad about yourself. It's like really degrading and demeaning. And so that didn't happen to me by someone in a position of power like an ex-president. So I can't imagine what it's like to be a 16-year-old and experience this by a former president of the United States.
Yeah, and that feeling of powerlessness, et cetera, makes it even worse.
Yeah.
So we're just having a conversation so that you hear everybody's perspective and understand. And if you're a guy and you didn't get it, well, Anna's saying something very interesting that you should take note of. If you think it's not a big deal, that doesn't mean it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
It's not about you, it's about the person you're doing it to.
Right. All right, let's do some international news. An earthquake struck on the border of Iran and Iraq, and unfortunately, hundreds of people have died as a result. Iran's western Kermanshah province bore the brunt of this trembler, with Iran's state-run news agency reporting the quake killed 341 people in the country and injured nearly 6,000. In Iraq, the earthquake killed at least 7 people and injured 535, all in the country's northern semi-autonomous Kurdish region. So what we've seen on social media in regard to some of the destruction is rather terrible. And honestly, when you look at this destruction, it's surprising that more lives weren't lost. But the community is getting together, coming together, and doing what they can to recover from this tragedy.
I want to give credit to a government we almost never give credit to these days, which is Turkey. They rushed in to help, and they sent 3,000 tents and heaters, 10,000 beds and blankets, and so their neighbors, shouldn't they do that? Yes, they should. And but Iran and Turkey do not get along, and recently the Kurdish area voted for independence in September in a referendum. Now, they're not inside Turkey, but even so, the Turks feel that is threatening because they're worried that their own Kurdish population would declare independence. So they were furious about that vote. But when the earthquake happened, so even though they have issues with both sides, both Iran and that portion of Iraq, Erdogan's government rushed in to help. Not a guy we compliment often, but credit where credit is due, and he did rush in to help in Rohingya as well for Bangladesh. So that's positive. And by the way, it's also smart if America should rush in to help,
right?
Because yes, we don't get along with Iran, but it's a good moment to be magnanimous and to offer
diplomatic, yeah,
and offer help, which America actually, to be fair, does all the time. And we also criticize the American government fairly regularly. But we have been great with humanitarian aid in situations like this. So let's also rush in and help our fellow humans.
Absolutely. All right, I want to make sure we get one more story in, and it's an important one. The Global Climate Project recently released data indicating that even though carbon emissions had flatlined between 2014 and 2016, unfortunately, the statistics show that carbon emissions recently have jumped up. So to give you the details on that, new projections suggest that emissions in 2016 are likely to increase, thwarting the drive toward keeping the global temperatures from continuing to rise. So there are a number of different factors, but one thing to keep in mind is that when it comes to the Paris Climate Accord, for instance, yes, the United States pulled out, that is problematic. The United States is also undoing some of the environmental regulations that were passed under the Obama administration, but there are other countries who signed the agreement who aren't necessarily putting action behind what they said that they would do. And so that is obviously a concern that should be looked into. Also, keep in mind that other countries have replied to the fact that Donald Trump has pulled out of the climate accord. Syria and Nicaragua, who originally did not want to be part of the agreement, are now stepping in, and they're saying that they will do what's necessary to cut carbon emissions.
So as far as the Paris Climate Accords and the rest of the world agreeing, we have become the sole rogue nation. So Nicaragua, to be fair, thought that the climate accords were not tough enough.
Right.
So they were hesitant to join because they wanted to go further, so give credit to Nicaragua there. Syria, on the other hand, was another holdout saying, I mean, it's funny, there's legitimate concerns that the government of Syria has gassed its own people.
Yeah.
But by the end, they're like, no, climate change is really bad.
I know, it's insane.
We have to sign because we're actually poisoning the whole planet and we're all going to die, not just our enemies, right?
Right.
And so now even the butcher in Syria has signed on. And by the way, Duterte, another butcher, signed on. Russia signed on. Maybe Putin should tell Trump to sign on, maybe then he'll do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, I mean, China is really stepping up when it comes to renewable energy, and it's really helping their economy because they're the leaders when it comes to hydro plants, when it comes to solar energy, wind energy, and so we're letting them take the lead. China's winning. China's winning.
That's a good way to motivate Trump. The Grand Ayatollah in Iran signed on. All of the Northern European countries signed on, all the Southern European countries signed on. Everyone but us has signed on to help the planet. So Trump stands alone as the one person who is saying, I will under no circumstances work with the rest of the world. He's bought, he's corrupt, he has the oil donors, and he's gonna serve them no matter how much damage it causes the entire planet. And by the way, I don't wanna just say that, so we should begin to help, but we should also note that as good a work as China has done on some of the renewable energies, they are still emitting way too much carbon, and so is India. And those are huge problems and part of the reason for the rise in carbon now. And unfortunately, the US and Europe, our level of carbon is not falling nearly as much as we had promised. So we all have to do better to make sure that we can actually save the planet and all of us human beings. Seems like a fair request. And everyone in the world but Trump agrees.
Yep.
All right, we'll see you in the post game. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Did I do it back?